Tarik LaCour from hook'emheadlines.com. We are coming back at you all today with just kind of an overarching look at Texas recruiting right now. Kind of taking a reset of where things are for Texas right now coming out of the two big official visit weekends and what we think the class could look like moving forward. What we kind of think. I think that it would be good for us to give each of our kind of most wanted players, maybe do 3-5 players or recruits in this class that, kind of the must hit targets at this point, if you will, and kind of gauge the positions of need in the 2024 class again, knowing what we have in the mix now and, what the 2024 and 2025 classes could look like moving forward. I also want to touch on summer workouts here at the end. We're getting into the closing stages of summer workouts before too long. And I just posted an article at the site today. I've heard a little bit about some of the freshmen that are looking good and some of the upperclassmen as well. I have an article on that coming on the site later this week. So we can talk briefly about that. But Tarik, me and Shane have done a couple of shows the last few days on, talking about recruiting. But, since the last time you were on, we picked up a lot of commitments, namely Jerrick Gibson and Nick Hibble last weekend. What are your thoughts on some of the guys that have joined the class?
Don't forget Christian Clark. He also committed last week. I'm very happy with Jerrick Gibson and I'm sorry, Gibson, not Gibson. Sorry, that's the thing. We're recruiting a guy named Gibson and we have a guy named Gibson. So you have to get those off the tongue. Very happy with Jerrick Gibson and Christian Clark and Kibble. I think they're good foundation pieces. Also, one of Sark's biggest recruiting wins ever was getting Tashard Choice to leave USC and come back to Texas, because I don't think you're getting Gibson and you're getting CJ Baxter unless Tashard Choice is on the 40 acres. And I'm hoping to see a large extension for Tashard Choice at the end of the year to keep him here until he leaves to be a head coach. I think he's going to be one of those position coaches that just goes on to be a head coach. Obviously, getting Kibble was good too. He fits the big human model that Kyle Flood likes and that you want as you go into the SEC. So that was very exciting to see. Obviously, you had two huge recruiting weekends. Lots of good vibes coming out of those. Now we just need to see, do those vibes turn into commitments? Obviously, Austin, Texas is a place that it's really easy to showcase. There's so much to do here. And especially if you're a young kid who's being hosted by a bunch of millionaires who can make everything in Austin happen for you in 48 hours. So, you have an easy sell. And something else that's actually a kind of a selling point too is the fact that just a few hours ago, Texas announced that they had sold out all their season tickets. So what that's telling recruits is people are excited about the Sark era. They're really invested in the program, and you're not going to be playing to an empty stadium. There's going to be 100,000 people there every week. And even I thought a really big telling point last year was the fact that the UTSA game was almost as well attended as the Alabama game. And the average attendance was over 100,000 last year. So that's showing you people are bought in and you're going to be going to someplace that's exciting to go to, especially as you head into the SEC. So that's where I'm at on that. Gibson and Clark adding to an already pretty heavy running room. As we head into the SEC, it's going to be a beautiful battle to see who's getting those carries, because they're not going to be easy to come by. And you can't just play the I'm a 5-star card because there's too many of the 5 or 4-star card, because there's so many of them running around the 40 acres these days.
Okay, so let's take a look here. I'd named one of my biggest positions of need in the 2024 class at this point. I say we each name 2 or 3. I'm going to stick to one of mine. I think that defensive line is probably the most critical position group in the 2024 class. Defensive back will be key, but I think we're going to be set there before too long. We already have a solid guy in the 24 class in Santana Wilson, and this could very well be a 5 or 6 defensive back class. I think the second most important position of need is probably going to be, you know what, I'll name three. I think it's either going to be offensive tackle or tight end. What are you thinking on that?
So let me make sure I got this right. So your top three are defensive line, offensive tackle, tight end.
Yeah, it's a 2A, 2B. Yeah, so for defensive line, I think it's easy to explain why. Defensive line, you could have multiple guys leaving this or next off season. You could have Alfred Collins, Devondre Sweat, and maybe Byron Murphy all leaving for the NFL. Then you still have Trill Carter coming back. You hope Sadir Mitchell, can contribute this fall and takes a big jump next year. You got some guys along the defensive line that could be solid 3-tech guys. Chris Ross is a name that comes to mind. But, overall, I think the defensive line, you got to add a few more pieces. On the offensive side of the ball, tight end, obviously, we need more depth. JT Sanders probably headed to the NFL. Beyond Gunnar Helm, you don't have much in this tight end room that's ready to contribute. I don't even think Gunnar Helm is going to be a guy contributing at a high level. I just think he's a solid blocking tight end. We don't have a guy like if Jordan Washington joins the class, great, but I don't think he's an immediate impact guy. He's also not a guy that's ready to be a blocking tight end right away. I think you got to get some guy that's ready to contribute to at least a decent level immediately at the tight end position in this 2024 class. And at offensive tackle, you got Kelvin Banks for another year. Christian Jones is headed to the NFL. And I don't really know what other offensive tackles you have on the depth chart right now where you can pinpoint one guy and say oh yeah, he's next up. You got some candidates that can be moved around, but all in all, Jones and Banks are your two clear guys. I think Cam Williams was a good candidate to take over one of those starting jobs, but he might end up being an interior offensive lineman for the next couple of years. So those are my three.
I'm going to say edge because Texas they had a good defense but didn't have a great pass rush. So you need a Buck or a Jack who can really get after the quarterback. Not many schools are going to have a Will Anderson and a Dallas Turner at the same time, but you need someone like them around. So that would be need number one for me. I would say agree with you that tackle is a concern as well. Although I think I think I'm not as concerned about it, but I would say it's something you need to get that for sure. Left tackle in this class, you need to be saying I'm going to pick up Kelvin Banks' heir apparent this year and get his feet wet in the SEC in year one, and then year two be ready to go. And then I think the other area I'm going to go with safety, because you're probably losing Catalan and Thompson at the end of the year. And while Derek Williams, I think, will be good, you need another guy to pair with him. I'm not totally sold on Keaton Crawford. I think Crawford's a really good athlete. I don't know if he's a great just football player. He's one of those people that you look at him and you say yeah, you have all the tools to be a great football player. You're tall, you're long, you're really, really fast, but it just doesn't seem to come together as much. He did look better, but I'm just not totally sold on him. So I think you need to find a good safety. So that's that. Those would be my three.
Okay. Yeah, safety.
Here's another one. But wide receiver is another one. Reason being, good chance if Quinn Ewers has a good year, you're losing all three of your starters, and
potentially Nayor.
Yeah, and potentially Nayor, and we're probably not going to get Micah Hudson, so that makes Ryan Wingo a must get. So yeah, those would be kind of my positions. Ian Boyd of Inside Texas, he had this kind of idea of where Texas could go to a scheme where Jordan Whittington is like the running back, but you're just moving him around. And that way you can get Nayor, A.D. Mitchell, Worthy, and Jay Witt all on the field at the same time, along with Jatavian Sanders. And that would be kind of kind of building a Death Star that way.
Yeah. I think there's a lot of creative ways you could go about doing that. Yeah, I mean, hell,
It'd be pretty hard to cover that.
I mean, you could line Worthy up in the backfield. You just have to motion him around a little bit. Like, yeah, there's a lot you can do.
But I think the idea of putting Whittington back there is you have a guy who can credibly run the ball versus you're probably not running an 160-pound wide receiver through, off tackle,
Yeah, I do like the idea. Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't have any qualms with all those guys being on the field at once. Yeah, I guess to address the edge rusher thing, I think a little bit of why I didn't say anything there is like I'm almost getting too sold on the idea. Like, yeah, I mean, Colin Simmons is a pretty heavy Texas lean right now, but like, I mean, I'm not going to say that's a slam dunk. It's not like he's already committed and signed. And even if he is, like, you still need a guy opposite him that's good. You probably have Barron Sorrell for one more year. I think he's going to be pretty special this year and next. But yeah, I mean, Ethan Burke, Colton Vasek, Jamon Tapp, you got other guys that can make some noise here, but you still want to get, it'd be really nice to get another high upside guy like Danny Okoye in this class.
Don't forget Justice Finkley. But yes.
Yeah, I mean, Finkley and Simmons would be a really nice duo at edge. All right. So I think for the most part, we are in agreement of what the needs are in this class. What are your 3 or 5 kind of must-get recruits right now?
Well, we've already talked about the obvious one, Colin Simmons, who reminds me a lot of a certain gentleman who went to Texas A&M, namely Von Miller. And he also has he's very twitchy and he can do a lot of things. He's just a great football player. And he's a guy that's at Duncanville, which is a powerhouse that Sark is starting to really close in Dallas and really lock down the top talent. I mean, the only person who really got away last year was Javian Taviano. And, that I think if Texas had pushed harder for him earlier, that you could have gotten him too. But I mean, you're going to lose some guys, but you're very much encircling Dallas. So that's a great one. The next guy I'm going to say is, I think, the best corner in the country, and that's Kobe Black. He's kind of the perfect picture of what Sark wants in the corner. Really long, really lean, great hips, can play all over. I could see PK using him kind of as a nickel safety corner, like just moving him around. Just like if you watch his old Washington defenses, he just calls them 5 defensive backs and he just moves them around for the game. And I think Kobe Black is perfect for that. I'm going to say another guy that's a must get. Will be 2 people, get one of them. Will be Brandon Baker or Daniel Calhoun, who are offensive tackles. Baker's more of a right tackle, but he can play left, and he's still the best offensive lineman in the country from Mater Dei, which is a place that Sark knows all too well. His son went there. Spencer Shannon, who's now at Texas, went there as well. And Sark knows that area very well from his USC days. Let's see here. I think Corian Gibson, who is being heavily recruited by Clemson, he's another must-get. This DB class has the potential to be what the 2018 class, what we thought they were going to be. I think this would actually be that, because I trust this defensive staff to actually develop them and use them correctly. Like, I don't know what was going on with Todd Orlando. We don't need to go down that rabbit hole now. And then last but not least, I think you have to get Ryan Wingo from Missouri. It looks increasingly likely that Micah Hudson will go to Tech. I'm surprised he hasn't committed yet. That's the interesting part to me, is like, okay, why hasn't he just gone ahead and done it? Like, everyone's saying you're going and you still haven't gone. It's like, something's kind of weird there, but be that as it may, it doesn't look like and they'll keep recruiting Hudson to the whistle, but let's assume he just goes to Tech and he just wants to be the guy, and that's fine. If we lose him to Tech, we lost him to Tech. Just own it. Don't say, well, we didn't want him anyway. No, he's an elite talent. You want him. That's losing Garrett Wilson twice, folks. So, yeah, so you have to get Ryan Wingo, who I think in a way, now I will say this, Micah Hudson is a huge loss, but I think the receiver Sark wants most in this class, if you put truth serum in his mouth, it would be Ryan Wingo. Because the fact that he was recruiting Wingo when he didn't have a wide receiver coach, and that Wingo always brings up, Sark has been recruiting me the whole time, that's your way of saying, like, yeah, I want you bad. So I think he's a must get. And like the places that some people are saying Georgia, things like that, Georgia is the cream of the crop of college football right now. You can't say anything wrong about their program. But one thing you can say is they don't really throw the ball. They don't, like, there's a reason A.D. Mitchell is at Texas and not at Georgia. It's like, you're not going to become a first round. Here's the other thing, too, that people don't point out as much. A.D. Mitchell wasn't the first guy to do that. Burton went to Alabama after they beat Alabama because he knew they weren't going to get him the ball. A.D. Mitchell, same thing. It's like, look, we run the ball, we throw it to the tight end. I'm just here. Let me go somewhere else where I can be used. So I think you can't let Wingo go to Georgia. I think that's a guy that Georgia's going to have the number one class. Let's not kid ourselves. But Wingo is a guy that needs to be on the 40 acres. He needs to be the cog of the wide receiver group. So those would be my five. Would be Ryan Wingo, Colin Simmons, Kobe Black, Corian Gibson, and one of Baker or Calhoun. And I think we will get one of. I think of the four that aren't Baker and Calhoun, I think we'll get all four of those. And I think we will get one of Baker or Calhoun. Even if they commit somewhere else first, I think Flood will stay on them and we'll get one at the end. But that will be contingent upon having a really good year.
Yeah, because, I mean, yeah. With Baker.
Oh, wait. Can I change? I can't. Dominic McKinley. That's another one. Defensive tackle out of Louisiana.
Yeah.
But a few reasons for that. One, you've already mentioned the defensive line, but I think that Texas needs to keep that pipeline in lieu of getting an elite talent out of Louisiana every year. Keep that going. So.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, McKinley is he the number one offensive or no, he's not the number one defensive tackle in the country. What am I saying? He's probably top five. I'll go ahead and say my five. Yeah, I mean, Colin Simmons is at the top. Number two for me is probably Kobe Black, just because you got to get those two guys in state. Number three for me at this point is probably Brandon Baker. I think that he would be a huge piece moving forward. Yeah, so I'll probably put McKinley at number four because I think there's other defensive linemen out there. It's kind of become a hot name recently. I think it was Nalin that mentioned that DeAndre Robinson was his prospect crush for this cycle, which is annoying because like a week earlier I had mentioned him as like one of my favorite official visitors. Now it's not cool to say that anymore.
Yeah, a lot of the defensive line in the country is very underranked. Like, I don't know how Jaden Jackson's not a high 4-star. He's really good.
Jaden Jackson is good. Shane really likes him. I think he is good too. I like TJ Lindsey a little bit better personally.
He's from IMG, right?
Yeah, they were both on campus last weekend.
Well, you're taking everybody else from ING. You might as well take him too.
Yeah, exactly. Johnson.
Let's go. Texas.
I thought at first those guys were just visiting just to get a look at him. But yeah, Texas really pushing for all. I mean, obviously they're pushing for Johnson Rebel and already got Gibson. But yeah,
Rebel was done.
Yeah, he's been, man. Yeah, he just has this glow in his eye when he talks about Texas. He's a good kid though. So yeah. Anyway, I'll put McKinley at 4, and then I'll put Wingo at 5. So our boards are pretty similar. There's 3 other guys that I think could be important to watch that Texas is still pushing for. I think all three of which visited Texas, but that are important names to watch heading into the fall. Depending on when decisions come. DeAndre Robinson is one of them. I think that Texas really wants him. I think Miles Davis is also one of the top safety priorities. Not as high as Gibson by any means, or Johnson or Bell. I think he's probably number 3.
But the thing is, so right now we have what the safety that is Wilson's son, is it?
Santana Wilson. He's a corner.
Yeah, Adrian Wilson. Okay. So if you get Kobe Black, Corian Gibson, Rubel, that's at 4.
Yeah.
Okay, you're probably. I think you're probably going to get Selman Bridges. That's 5.
Yeah.
And I think they really like Wardell Mack. So I think those would be the 6.
I think Joshua Lair is probably going to end up in this class.
I don't know.
Not to mention what happens if they get a guy like Aaron Hampton or Terry Bussey are both playing wide receiver.
I think Bussey's going to end up in college
Station. Yeah, probably.
He won't get to play with Jimbo Fisher because Jimbo will be fired after this year, but that's another story.
I'll get into mentioning Bussey here in a little bit. I have another topic that I think could be interesting to cover before we just move on from recruiting. Yeah, I think Miles Davis, I'll stick to it. I think they're going to recruit him for a while. And then I think Blake Ivy is a guy that they're still going after.
I think he's
Clear Springs.
Yeah, I think he's going to be an Aggie.
He probably will, but I think if Texas ends up missing on Brandon Baker, that they're going to push harder for Ivy.
I could see that.
I think he's number 3 among the offensive tackle priorities. Obviously, Calhoun Baker being at the top. Okay. I'm going to give you 5 names here. I want to see your opinion on how you think Texas is going to recruit these guys heading into the fall. All these guys are either leaning away from Texas or, soon to be or already committed elsewhere. Actually, I don't know if any of them are committed yet. These are all guys I could see them recruiting through the finish line, though. Micah Hudson, what do you think about that?
Recruit to the finish line. If you get Wingo, you kind of shrug and go on with your life and say, well, just like Evan Stewart, I'll never play him. So what's the big deal?
Yeah, fair. Justin Williams, 5-star linebacker out of Oak Ridge.
Did he go? Is that the one that's going? Is he? No, that's
Oregon.
That's Ty Anthony Smith, who's the other guy that's leaning USC, isn't he?
Ty Anthony Smith. It's either going to be USC or A&M. I'm not exactly sure.
Right. He keeps. That's the one that just is kind of a loop to loop there. Okay. Yeah. Where is he leaning right now? I can't remember.
Justin Williams, Oregon. He's got Georgia and Oregon.
Yeah, he seems like a guy who just wants to get out of state. So I feel like also you recruited like one of the great linebacker classes of all time last year, and you're probably going to redshirt most of those guys. So you'll probably just get one linebacker in this class. So
okay.
He's a guy that like. Because you got Anthony Hill, because you got Lethau, and because you got Burrell, you're just like, okay, this is a year we can not get the guy,
Yeah. So you think just go ahead and focus on 2025 instead of?
I think you keep recruiting Ty Anthony Smith.
Okay.
But besides that, if it's a Georgia Oregon thing, that I think he also, the way he plays, he kind of fits more what Georgia does than what Texas does, I think.
He would be occupying a similar role to what Anthony Hill does. Terry Bussey, you mentioned him a moment ago. You think he's just A&M bound, or?
The thing is, because A&M was, it's like you never get over your first love. And Texas A&M was on him from the get-go, and Texas is like kind of getting on him now. The other thing is, I'm not so sure that Bussey could be a very good receiver or a really good defensive back. He reminds me a lot of a player. I don't know if you remember him, Adoree Jackson. He was at USC. He played all ways, and he like Adoree Jackson could have been like an elite wide receiver or an elite cornerback or an elite. He could just do all those things, I think, and but Bussey, if I understand, really wants to be a receiver. So my feeling is, okay, you already have Freddie DeBow. You may get Wingo. Don't we have another receiver committed? I can't remember. Is it just DeBow's right now?
Parker Livingstone is committing on.
Right, Parker Livingstone. He's going to be the longer type of guy.
Maybe Hampton.
You find a way for Bussey if you can get him, but he's not like. He doesn't feel like a must-have to me. He's like if you got it, I'm really happy, but if you didn't get it, I'm not crying. But not because he's not a great player. It's just like, okay, you already have what you need at that point.
Okay. Fair
and
enough.
one thing that I think that Sark is trying to do is he's being a lot more self-conscious about taking, not overloading the receiver room when you only use 3, kind of a thing.
Yeah.
Like he came in, he said, "Look, why do we have all these wide receivers and we're not using most of them? So that's just wasting a scholarship."
Fair. Okay. Next one I had is Nigel Smith,
edge, right?
defensive lineman out of Melissa. He actually might still be the top defensive lineman out at Texas this cycle. It's kind of a.
Where's he? Yeah, I remember who he is. Where's he leaning? I forget.
I think it's OU, but it's one of it seems like more of like a DJ Hicks style of recruitment. Obviously not as big of a prospect, but like where just communication hasn't been very good between him and Texas. But he's set for an official visit this fall. He's already got one scheduled.
I still don't know how Oklahoma didn't get Hicks last year. They needed Hicks more than they needed Jackson Arnold. So really, to me, that was kind of the thing, was that I was like, okay, Venables is like a defensive line guru, and you didn't like get that elite defensive lineman in the first cycle. That something was that they really need that this year, and they still don't have it. And they lost their best defensive lineman, LeBlanc or whatever his name was. Yeah, but back to Nigel Smith. Yeah, I guess it's all going to depend on what happens with a few other people. It seems like Bo Davis likes certain people. He's not like a rank. He's not like Mac Brown. Mac Brown was more of a rankings guy versus Bo Davis is more of the I want to see it in person, and if I like what I see, then that's what I'm going to take. So I think he like really likes like the guys who they've been on campus recently. So I'm not as sure about Nigel Smith. I mean, they'll keep recruiting him, I'm sure, to the whistle, but
I struggle. I struggle with confidence in him for a lot of guys that aren't in the Southeast. It's just like he seems to recruit those guys the best. And in state, we've flubbed some defensive line recruits. But
I'll die on this. I still think Justice Finkley would probably be more of a better like hand in the dirt, almost a 5 technique than like an edge guy. But that's another story.
4-eye or a 5?
Like a 4-eye, yeah.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, he did that some last year, I thought.
But he was really effective.
Yeah.
But to Nigel Smith, I'm sure they'll keep recruiting him. I think Oklahoma is going to have a really good defensive line cycle this year. So if they get Nigel Smith, that wouldn't shock me. If they don't get David Stone, oh man, I was like, oh man, like they already have the hardest schedule in the country in 2024. So you're gonna need some help.
This is true. And they don't have any elite defensive commits right now. Yeah,